Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming into our Shoreline Church midweek. It's our first one in the December month. It's an exciting time. I'm sure your Christmas trees are being gathered or already set up. I had to do mine day after Thanksgiving. I think we got right on it. It's a great time to just remember why we're here, why we do what we do. And that's because of Jesus. He's the reason. And I just thought it would be a great time to share a story about, highlighting a group of people that were intentional, that were dedicated, that were faithful, that wanted to meet the King of the Jews, the King of the Judeans, as they would call them in the ancient Near East. And there's a special group of people that I want to kind of highlight, but I also want to highlight some super awesome, supernatural things that God does in the Bible, and how we can trust the Bible, how we can rely on the Bible, and how we should read the Bible every day of our lives to get more and more understanding of what God has already done and what he's doing in our life and what he'll continue to do, all until we see Jesus again. So let's start with a word of prayer. Karen, would you pray for us?
All right,
let's do it.
Well, God, thank you for today. Thank you for bringing us all together in person and on Zoom. And thank you that we can have midweek. And I pray that you just really speak through Geo, help us to have a great fellowship afterwards. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
We're going to begin our story, Karen, with the Christmas star. I did this lesson on a Sunday, but I've added more stuff to it because there's a lot to unpack when you think about the ancient Near East and the astronomy. Not to be confused with astrology. That's a perversion of astronomy. But in the ancient Near East, they studied the stars. They looked at the stars. They believed that the God was doing things in the heavens, and God set things in the heavens. And so this understanding was handed down through the centuries. Before the Bible was written, there was knowledge that God had created the heavens. He created the earth. He created the stars. We're going to take a look at a few of those passages, but what's really cool is that this was knowledge before the actual Bible was written, and the stars had meanings. And when you properly understood the makeup of the foundation of true biblical astronomy, you'll appreciate these verses in the Bible about God made the heavens. Like I said earlier, there's a counterfeit study called astrology, which is kind of the perversion. It's kind of like over here on Somas Road, you go there, you see the palm reader on Somas.
Oh yeah, the yellow house.
The yellow house there.
Right.
It's a perverted view of astrology and how our life can be predicted according to the stars, which is not true. We're supposed to rely on God and be faithful. So that's kind of the idea of this time. I want to look at the first passage is in Psalm 147, and I want to read it together because it's a really great passage to read. It says, God, or he, determines the numbers of stars and calls them each by name. Now, just before that, it says God created the heavens and the earth, and he set stars in their course, and you fixed names to them and their groupings. This information was obviously given to Adam, who taught his descendants and taught the patriarchs, and this was passed on from generation to generation. It's kind of like having family devos. You want to pass on things to the next generation. You want to pass on information. Sometimes you just share stories. Sometimes you just share your heart and your life about what God is doing. In this case, these kinds of things were handed down to the generations after them. So, and then you come across this passage in Genesis chapter. Okay. And I'll read it again. And God said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and the days and the years, and let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light to the earth. And so it was. That word there, that phrasing of marking sacred times. I think some versions have seasons. But this is a sacred marking. And I think that's important because that Hebrew word is to mark something significant. And so what Genesis is trying to tell us is that when God made the heavens, he marked certain things in there for us to notice, for his people to notice, or for anyone who's studying the stars to notice. He's doing something important.
I've read this passage many times and never once did I read it that way, that when there's certain lights, it means a sacred time happens. Like, like you said, the Christmas lights. I even think about, the lights that they have in Norway, the northern lights. Like, I wonder what that meant too.
Yeah, absolutely. And some versions have seasons. We have winter, fall, spring. God designed these, but he also designed the view of the sky to really declare his glory. And so you're going to see this in Genesis chapter 49. There's this amazing blessing that is given from Isaac to his sons, and his son Judah is told this blessing from his dad. And he writes here in verse 9 through 10, says, "You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return." I wish I could read that word. "From the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down like a lioness. Who dares to rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be." So you have this, they have this concept, this idea that there's a lion of Judah, and the one who holds the scepter is going to come from that tribe. Yeah. Now, if you're an astronomy person that studies the stars, you've already gone, oh, that word in Hebrew, that's the word regal. That's the word Regulus. That's the star in the sky. So there's already a connection to a star in the sky that is called Regulus in Aramaic, Regal in Hebrew. And so you're already, if you're a person that studied the stars or looked at the stars in that way, you would think that there's something happening in the skies. And it's happening in the constellation of the Lion of Judah. And lo and behold, one of the ancient constellations was Leo. And that's an important, because we're going to find later how God announces the birth of Jesus through the constellation of Leo, which I thought was kind of cool.
That is fun.
Okay. And so later on in the New Testament, there's tons of quotes about the stars in the Old Testament. I'm just giving you a little snippet, but Paul writes this in Romans 10. He writes this thing like, hey, how is everyone going to know? How is, faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard to the word of Christ. Very famous. We love using that passage. And he says, but we ask, did they not hear? And he says, of course they did, because he's wondering, have people heard the message? And Paul's going, yes, of course they did. And then he quotes a psalm, and the psalm that he quotes is Psalm 19. He says, the heavens, the stars, the night sky, when you look up, it declares the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth their speech, and night after night, they display knowledge. The skies display information, and there is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their line, or their voice in the Hebrew, goes out into all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. The psalm denotes that more than just having an awe for God, this passage informs us that God placed revelation in the heavens. The stars are prophecies. They show knowledge. They tell of God's glory, and they set forth a purpose. And so, I know astrology has gotten the fad at this time of our life, but in the ancient Near East, there were people that studied the stars.
Right. Yeah.
People that looked at the stars, and we're going to take a look at those people. They're very important to the story of Jesus, because in Matthew chapter 2 in the Gospels, we're going to read this little account here, and you're going to run into this group of guys who study the stars and have shown up in Bethlehem asking about the King of the Judeans, the King Jesus being born. So in Matthew chapter 2 and verse 1, it says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? Like, first of all, how would they even know?
Yeah.
Like, how do these guys even know? They're not even Jews.
Mm-hmm.
The Magi or the Magi, they're Gentiles. They're not like familiar. They're not Jewish people.
Right.
But yet they know about the King of the Jews. First question is, how in the heck do they know?
Yeah.
Like, how do they know?
Thinking, how?
And then they say, we saw his star. His star. We saw the star of the King of Judea. We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. So there's these guys that show up in King Herod and says, well, where is he? Where's the King of the Judeans? Right? And Herod gets all insecure and tries to kill the babies, right? We know that story, but it's interesting.
How did they know?
People always skip that part. Like, how did they know? Like, what did they come from?
So they studied the Old Testament, or
was we call them
written?
Yeah, we call them the wise men, right?
Yes.
All right. So this is a really, really great part of this story. The wise men. Now, if you read your Old Testament and you know that when God's people get unfaithful, remember another nation conquered Jerusalem?
Oh, yes.
The Babylonians conquered them. And guess who they took with them back?
Daniel.
They took Daniel.
The people who
That's right.
Remember,
what are their names? Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and they took Daniel, they took Ezekiel. So they took all these awesome guys to Babylon, and then Daniel didn't want to eat the food. He's like, I can't eat that. I can't eat from the king's table. I'm gonna eat vegetables.
Oh, and then when he ate the vegetables, they're like, hey, they're stronger than everybody
else.
Right.
So they're like,
then they started paying more attention to what their teachings were.
And then the king had this crazy dream, and then it scared him. And guess which group was called to interpret the dreams for the king Nebuchadnezzar.
Oh yeah.
It was the Magi. And Daniel was a part of the Magi's in Babylon.
Didn't know.
So you have Israel at their worst. You have Israel doing bad spiritually. You have Israel who failed to uphold to the decrees of justice and righteousness and and they are just doing poorly spiritually. Here you have God preparing a Christmas gift.
Wow.
For them 500 years before it happens.
In the book of
Daniel is the chief of the Magi's, the astronomers, because of his aptitude. The Bible said he was very smart,
right,
and they liked him. And so we see that Daniel's embedded into the Babylonian culture. But that's not where the Magi stop, because they're defeated by the Persians. And guess what the Persians do when they defeat Babylon? They like Daniel so much, they put him in charge again. So Daniel has this tremendous influence over the Magi's. And this is where they gain knowledge from Daniel about the stars, about Judah, about the scepter, about a Judean king going to be born in Bethlehem. This is where the Magi begin to hear about this incredible God who is going to come down and be born among men, and he's going to save mankind. This is where they learn it. They learn it when Israel is doing so poorly spiritually. God was preparing an awesome Christmas gift. Isn't that great? You know, in Christmas, you know, we have to give gifts to people even when they're not doing great. That's encouraging.
Yeah.
Huh?
I was curious, what year was Daniel again?
Daniel was about 586.
586 BC. So, and Jesus's time was like
third when he was born.
So like almost over 500 years, God was preparing
500
this for Jesus. Wow.
This is how the Magi understood. This is why they show up out of nowhere. But, you know, I was never taught this as a kid. How did they know? Like, they just kind of showed up there in the Christmas play automatically. They got in. And how'd they get there? Who are these guys? How do they have this knowledge? Who taught them this? And
I just assumed they were Jewish.
Yeah, they were Gentiles. They were Persians. But the Magi, they believed in God, They believed that God was going to be born in the Judeans, and he was going to save mankind. And they learned this from Daniel, because Daniel interpreted this dream of Nebuchadnezzar, and it shocked everyone, and it proved to the Babylonian Empire that God was real. And so Daniel was put in this prestigious position to pass on this incredible knowledge about God and what his plans are to these Gentile men, who later on their descendants are going to remember and study the stars. And so this is what activates them. So they see something in the heavens happening that is very unique and is very rare, and it only happened once. And they saw the movement of stars. And I'm going to kind of show you what they saw. We see sometimes, I think last year, Jupiter and Saturn were together. I think Dave Chin took a picture for me.
Thanks, Dave.
And so this is like Jupiter and Saturn. So this is what something that's similar to what the Magi, they're going, there's the moon, there's this big planet. So what's going on up there? Like everyone says that this is only going to happen once in so many hundred years, right? Remember like Haley's comment? Yeah, this is a significant event where the Magi were going like, whoa, this is, it's happening. And then they have to cross check, where's it happening in the constellation? What? So they start to study and they start to look at this movement of stars. And so what they discover is what John writes about many years later, about 990 AD. John the Apostle writes the book of Revelation, and he reveals this. He reveals what happened in the birth of Jesus. This chapter is about the birth of the King of the Jews, the King of the world, our Savior, our awesome, incredible Jesus. He goes back and he gives us insight into the celestial objects that were moving in the sky that confirm what the Magi saw and why they acted on it. This is this is one of my favorite. I read this passage for many years, and I just I go, okay, Jesus was born. Amen. I didn't even know what the stars meant and all the moon and the 12 the crowns over her head. You know, when I was a young boy, I went to Catholic school, and they had the statue of Mary, and they had the stars above her head, and they had this, what looked like to me was a horn, but it was actually the moon. I found out many years later. It looked like a horn. I thought, was that the devil? So Mary standing out. If you ever enter like a cathedral or a Catholic cathedral, you'll see Mary standing on the moon with stars above her. And what it's describing is it's describing Revelation chapter 12. What it's describing is what God has declared the wonders of his work in the skies that the Magi saw, and they came and wanted to meet the King of the Judeans who was going to save the world. And so this is what John writes. I'm going to see if I can lift this higher a little bit. There we go. Okay. A great and wondrous sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun. Let's just pause there for a second. In the constellation, that's the constellation. That's the sign of the Virgo, of the Virgin. She's in there. This is ancient Near East astronomy. There is the Virgin there, and she's clothed with the sun. And so there's this movement of the sun that's in that constellation with the moon at her feet. The moon was literally at her feet in the constellation. And that's what got the Magi going. Wait, something's going on here. And the 12 and the crown of 12 stars on her head. In the constellation of Virgo, there are 12 stars in that constellation. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign in heaven appeared, an enormous red dragon with 7 horns and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his head. His tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child the moment it was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. That's Genesis chapter 49. And her child, I can't read the bottom of that. I'm so sorry.
Oh, here.
I can't read. Oh, here it is. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. So I'm just going to show you. So I'm going to show you the constellation. This is what the Magi saw.
You're kind of in the way. Let's move your picture.
There you go. So this is what the Magi saw. So this is the constellation of Virgo. The sun is in the Virgo. It's in her belly. The moon is at her feet. This is so these stars start moving around, and there's this movement, and the Magi are noticing it. They're noticing that something really amazing is happening. And they're noticing just above the Virgo constellation is the Leo constellation, the Lion of Judah. And so there's this movement of these stars. There's the brightest star and there's the biggest planet. The brightest star is called Regulus at his feet, if you remember Genesis 49. And Jupiter is called the king's planet. And below the Virgo is the dragon, or the Hydra, which is there as he's trying to snatch the child being born. So there, if all these signs are in the heavens,
Wow.
at the moment these magics go on, like, this is something is happening. This is what we've been studying. We've been waiting for. It's once in a lifetime, or once in a world civilization is happening. And so they're starting to realize that something big is going down. And so in the constellation of Leo, it joins up with Jupiter, the king planet, and Regulus, the brightest star planet. And they're moving together, and they're conjoining together. And this happens for about 80 minutes on September 11th, 3 BC. It's in the evening time.
September
And
11th.
Jesus is born during this time of the constellation. And this is what the Magi saw. And this is why they go, okay, wait, we now have to travel and go and visit and see with our own eyes the king of the Judeans. The Magi are not there at the manger. They never show up, but in your photographs of your Christmas postcards, they're there for some reason. They were never actually there at the manger birth with Mary and Joseph. They show up actually about a year and a half later, because they're traveling and they're looking at the stars and they're being moved toward Bethlehem. And so they travel.
So my manger is wrong,
Your manger's wrong, honey.
because it shows a baby. Man.
Charlie Brown Christmas.
Those are some misconceptions about the Magi.
So I have a question. Does that mean Christmas, like when Jesus was born, was really September 11th then?
Yeah, that kind of freaks us out, because
That was-
our idea of September 11th is like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. But
Yeah. So
it's kind of like September 15th. A lot of things happen on April 15th, like the Titanic sunk,
on my daughter's birthday.
Abraham Lincoln was killed. I mean, it's just a date. I mean, it shouldn't freak us out, but it's just a date. But it does freak some people out.
Wow.
So after he's born, and I here on the left is the astronomical history of what was happening during that time, because all the astronomers have records of all this stuff. And so you can go back and look at all the records and all the eclipses. But there was this one specific movement of Jupiter and of Regulus in conjunction with Leo, and they're moving around, and they're the massing of these planets that are coming together. And that's what John describes as this great wonder in the sky. But what I wanted to hone in on was the Magi for a moment. I think we can learn an important lesson about the Magi. The Magi studied their astronomy, and they remembered what Daniel told them. I think one thing we can draw from that is we can really appreciate the studying of our Bible, like spending some time in your Bible. There's great content. There's great classes you can attend online. I've been attending classes for the last 2.5 years, and it's revolutionized my understanding of the Bible. And I was your minister for most of those years, but I'm learning as I go, and it's been awesome. I've really got a better understanding of the Old Testament, which helps me understand the New Testament. So I think one thing we can draw from the Magi is that they were intentional about their Bible study. They were really focused on it, and I think we could do ourselves a great faithful service by spending this holiday time. We're going to have a lot of downtime. Spend some time studying something. Read a book. Maybe you don't like to read, listen to a podcast. I'll give you a recommendation for a couple podcasts. One is podcast is the one that you really like. Bema podcast, really good podcast.
It's really, really good. It's eye-opening. It's like you're reading the Bible all over again from Genesis.
That's one. Then you have the Bible Project, because they got another podcast. And if you want to go super nerd, like super Bible nerd, the Naked Bible. But that's like super nerdy stuff. It's awesome and it's rich. The other thing we can learn from the Magi is that they wanted to be with Jesus. They wanted to meet the Savior. And I think that speaks to our prayer time. I think, how do we connect with Jesus? It's through our prayer time. It's through our thinking about him. Maybe it's meditating. maybe you're not a good out loud prayer, but meditate. There's this great concept of meditating on God's word, meditating on God, thinking about God. And so there's this idea of meditation. So these guys were wanting to be in see the King, and they spent a lot of time traveling to make that happen. And I think the third thing we can draw from the Magi is that they were faithful to the teachings of Daniel. Like Daniel taught them about the Hebrew God. They were faithful, and they believed in one God, just like Daniel. And Daniel was in a world he lived in where there were many gods, but he goes, no, there's just one God, and that's the God of Israel. And so I think there's a great lesson for us as we look at the Christmas star, as we see all these astronomy, and we can appreciate all that. That's super awesome. If you want to go in depth, there's a bunch of podcasts on this. This is well-known information. But for us, I think as disciples, there's this intentionality. And I think we have to be intentional about not just our Bible study, but we have to be intentional about our fellowship. These guys traveled a year to have fellowship with Jesus. And some of us live in the same city, right? So be intentional about your fellowship. Now, if you're at home and if you're cautious of COVID, you can be intentional with phone calls, FaceTime. You can be very intentional. And I want to encourage you to be intentional, because it's so important to have great fellowship, to be connected to each other, especially during the holidays. It's a great time, but we have extra time, and let's use it to really build each other up. I think that's some important things we can learn from the Magi.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for them, 500 years later, to be focused on this, they're looking for Jesus, and for them to catch that and travel all that way, they made time for that.
And a side note, there was a group that broke off in the Magi, and they created astrology, and that's where the word magician comes from. So they perverted their sacred teaching of the stars and God and made it into something else. That's where the root word magician comes from. Comes from the religious caste of the Magi. But they were a perverted group. They were not faithful to God.
Like astrology.
Yeah, astrology. Yeah,
is the perverted group.
Yep, it's perverted.
Perverts.
Yeah, so I thought that might encourage you. We can learn a few lessons. So that was cool. I really like that. Adding a little more about the Magi, what we can draw from the Magi and their example of being intentional, being faithful, wanting to be Jesus, read our Bible, prayer. Those are all great things to do to have a great Christmas season.
Yeah. Thank you.
Did you want to say something about Draw the Circle?
Oh, yeah.
I have this book. I had them on Sunday. It's Draw the Circle. We're going to be doing this in January. We're going to kick off our year together. We want you to join us. We want you to be unified with all of us. It's a 40-day prayer journey. We're going to do it together. We feel like praying our way to see God's work done is the way to do it. We got to pray our way through it, and we got to really focus on it. And so it's Draw the Circle by a great author. You might have read some of his other books, Mark Batterson. He's really great. And it's a 40-day prayer challenge, and we want to do it together. We're going to be giving you more information as January approaches on when the start day is going to be and all that. So we want to make sure everyone's back for the holidays before we start that. But it's $6 before December 19th.
Yes.
And it's $8 after that.
Right.
So you can buy it online. Karen sent out an email last week that has a link to it, and you can purchase it online, and then we'll record it because we have the list, and then we'll give it to you on Sunday.
Yes, you see the big box back there behind us that is full of books. So we have plenty of them for you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
You can buy it. You can go to our website. There's a button to purchase it. You just click on there, or you can pay us on Sunday in person too.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to close out with the last phrase here. The Bible makes one breathless in its accuracy and integrity. And that's from the Promised Seed, the book, Paul Willery. I'm just going to call him Paul Dub.
I can't even say
That's
his
a tough
name.
word. And obviously God's in control. He can be trusted. And we should seek him with all of our heart during this awesome season of Christmas.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's our podcast. I'm going to stop recording here.